You're very welcome, everybody. My name is Ian Ryan. I'm Energy and Utilities Manager in Wyeth, Skeeton, County Limerick. And we've been through a journey certifying the site to the Alliance for Water Stewardship standard. This is an international standard for water stewardship. It aligns quite well for those that may know the AWS standard. There's some alignment there. Many companies in Ireland would attain the AWS standard. Nestle as an organisation have decided to partner with the Alliance for Water Stewardship, which is an international standard for water stewardship. So we'll kick in and just have a look at what the standard is about. Well, water is the #1 global sustainability issue according to the United Nations. Today, over 650 million people lack access to drinking water, and it's expected that by 2030, demand for water will exceed supply by approximately 40%. There's also approximately 1.2 billion people on the planet drinking water that's not of sufficient quality for human consumption. According to the United Nations, better water management is key to adapting to climate change, and businesses have a role to play in promoting this. This very much aligns with what the AWS is all about. Unlike many standards you might be familiar with, like ISO, etc., the AWS very much has a very global view about water at a catchment level and bringing stakeholders and colleagues in your catchment along on a journey, and it very much promotes that and it's built into the standard. Promoting the Alliance for Watership standard, so it's a relatively new standard. Nestle signed up in 2018 to this standard, and a new version from 1.0 to 2.0 was released in 2019. It's the leading global standard for good water stewardship, and I think that's the key word there is stewardship, performance certification. It guides Nestle in defining and implementing water stewardship actions where it matters locally. As the water challenge is best managed collectively, the impact of our efforts will be all more powerful and efficient in the industry, and others adopt a single robust standard. I suppose the thinking behind that is that, you know, as Nestle has seen with many of the projects it's implemented, and we'll talk about it a little bit later through the Nestle Caring for Water program, which was co-authored to align with this standard, and you can get some more details on the Nestle website where projects are around the world. The projects have seen better impact in terms of the water catchment by investing in education and some capital in water projects upstream in terms of rivers and water sources in the general catchment area. And I think that's what the standard hopes to attain is, you know, is a collective input to your local catchment area and your local water abstraction. What's the standard all about? So it's broke into kind of 5 key outcomes, and I'll just briefly outline them. The standard is intended to drive social, environmental, and economic benefits. So it's not built around compliance per se, but compliance is a pillar. It is about, its intention is to drive, you know, social interaction in terms of water. It asks water using sites to address these challenges in a way that progressively moves them to best practice in terms of the 5 outcomes below. So good water governance, you know, that's very much around the stakeholder engagement and compliance at a very basic level. So for example, for ourselves, you know, with an IPPC license, you know, making sure that we comply with all those license requirements in terms of extracting water. We take water from the river and return it to the Shannon estuary, so also our wastewater discharge. Sustainable water balance is about trying to balance the water resource in the catchment with the demands on that resource. So that includes, you know, implementing projects that will reduce water consumption in the catchment area. Water quality is a key part of it, so it's not just about having access to water, as we've seen earlier. There's 650 million people worldwide that don't have access to water, and there's 1.2 billion people that do have access to water that's not of good quality. So the quality of the water is also very key in terms of how we implement this standard. Important water related areas. So that was just locally here is 2 examples is probably the best way to describe that. One, the estuary we discharge into here is actually a special area conservation for birds. So that's a water related issue, and that we need to maintain that sanctuary for the birds along the waterfront. And also upstream of us, there's a weir where we break from tidal into river water. And I know there's some local issues with the fishing community around that weir and the transportation of fish up the river. The final element is, I suppose, not widely applicable to ourselves here in Ireland. So it's not something that we suffer from, but certainly at a global scale is a major issue, is access to water, sanitation and hygiene. So that falls under WASH. So like literally just have water to wash yourself and maintain good hygiene standards. As we said, there's quite a lot of people, almost 2 billion in total, with no access to water or very unsafe water, let alone for drinking, let alone water for any kind of hygiene or sanitization. Clear lined approach to standards. So you can see here, we won't go into it in a lot of detail, but you can see here, I suppose the first level on it is at a very local level, and this standard requires you to think very much outside the walls of your factory, premises, organization, right up to a global level. But at local level, it's transparency and basic things requirement, just legal regulatory requirements, as I spoke about earlier. And then the next step then is improvement. So it's about, reducing that water, making sure you use that resource, not contaminating it. Just excellence in water resource management. And at a very basic level, we'll talk about it briefly later. That's just basic mapping and stuff, and then it can be as complicated as you wish. But you can certainly make your way through this standard at a very basic level and then build on that. In fact, the standard is actually structured in that way. So unlike some other standards where you have compliance or non-compliance and then non-conformities, with the AWS, there's core compliance requirements you must meet. Once you've met them, then everything else after that is scored. And the scoring determines whether you get core, a gold certification or platinum certification is the highest that can be achieved. And the final element in it then is engagement. So that leads into sustainability. So that's very much about the stakeholder engagement. And we'll speak about that in a few moments as well. So just AWS at our site here. So the catchment, we're actually physically on the River Deal and extract water from that and treat all that water on site ourselves. And we discharged into the Shannon Estuary, which is part of the River Shannon. So in theory, our catchment goes all the way up to County Fermanagh, right up to Lough Eyre, where the source of the River Shannon is, and identify all the stakeholders that have an impact on our site. We've worked very much on the main estuary itself and on the River Deal and all the stakeholders along that, and we've identified over 100 stakeholders. We use a tool called the CRP tool, which is just an Excel sheet to track those stakeholders, to see what we believe their feelings are towards us, to track communications with those stakeholders, build an engagement plan, how we're actually going to engage with those people at a local level, and contact details for them as well. So some of them would be NGOs, some of them would be state organisations, EPA, Irish Water, etc. But it's a really good mapping exercise to map out all the stakeholders in terms of your catchment area. Skeeton, a history of water. So just to give a bit of a background, Skeeton is an infant nutrition manufacturing site. So we make baby formula as a major component that's manufactured here on site. We started, the first can was manufactured in 1974, and we received a water extraction license of 1,000 gallons per day, good old days, from Limerick County Council. And that still exists to this day. That license is still in place. Over the years, there's been a lot of focus on water because it is a key ingredient. It does go into our product, and therefore is an ingredient in our products. We were acquired in 2013 by Nestle, and after that we set some water glide paths, and I'll show you some of them in a while. We integrated water into our ISO systems in the absence of any other standard at the time, and have moved that, I suppose, compliance and certification into the Alliance for Water Stewardship now. While we still hold much of the data in our 50,001 systems, the overall certification for the site in terms of water is now the AWS standard. Water stewardship on our site, the head of operations of Nestle, a board member, Majid Batado, on May 31st, 2018, announced that Nestle were going to be signatories to the AWS standard and launched the Caring for Water program. There's links within this. I spoke about it earlier, brings you to all the projects that Nestle have sponsored or implemented across the world. Some of them are quite interesting, especially out in water stressed areas of the world. That was standard 1.0 when we signed up to it, and we were told very soon after that 2.0 would be out. So we waited basically for the new standard to come to start our implementation. Nestle has committed to implementing this standard in every Nestle factory worldwide by 2025. So 20 March, fast forward 20 March 2019, World Water Day, the AWS2 standard was launched, and we started our stewardship AWS journey, I suppose, in anger. And we've worked away on that, and we're due to do our certification on the 3rd week of March this year. And the week before we went to lockdown, so we couldn't get the auditors over. We worked away then until September and finally got we believe, the world's first AWS remote audit for a newly certified site. We had auditors from New Zealand, Australia, Scotland, and a catchment expert also on the audit team, done remotely over 3 days. Now, it took probably 3 weeks in total. In reality, it was kind of a week of pre-documentation, the 3 days of the actual audit, and then, you know, a bit of follow-up on Q&A the following week. But all in all, a very interesting process, a very collaborative process, definitely there to, you know, to support you and help you along through the certification of the standard and understanding it, and nothing to be threatening at all in that process. Out of the World Water Day, we signed up 2 people on site to become water stewards through the water stewardship program run by the Lean and Green Skill Net, and we built out our business priorities. Now, while these on screen probably look reasonably quite simple, I think this was our 11th rev of them. The first 9 we discovered were all actions after doing some deep soul thinking, and we built these core actions, and they've stood well, our business priorities. They've stood well for us, and they're also aligned with the priorities in the AWS standard, which are reputational, physical, regulatory, and financial. I suppose of these, the most interesting one for us has been the mapping the true cost of water. As I said, we extract water from the river Deal and process it all here right up to reverse osmosis, potable water standards, and past that. So the true cost of water was a real eye opener for the site. I think, you know, we didn't realize just how much money we were spending processing our water when we took in all the cost of labs, technicians, etc., all that in. And what we have now is a robust cost that we can stand over in terms of justifying future water reduction projects. We can actually say it's going to save this much to the business and give a proper payback. So I highly recommend people, you know, try and look at that. It might be somewhat simpler if you have municipal water being fed in from Irish Water or the likes into your site, but there's also, even at that, there's, you know, some level of basic filtration and other costs that really you just kind of ignore day to day. But when you do sit down and work it all through, it's actually quite a substantial cost on any given site. How AWS is supplied in the Skeeton factory, I think we've covered quite a lot of this. Key aspects of this to try and get us to the AWS standard was a water mapping exercise. While we had many water meters, they were old. Some of them weren't functioning well and weren't calibrated. Some of them weren't functioning at all or misnamed. So quite a lot of work into getting that metering up to scratch. The water mapping had to also be done. We did the AWS one, which I'll show you in a moment, and we extended that further into a detailed sand key diagram. And working out the true cost of water has really driven the capability to put real water saving projects on the table and make them financially viable, not just a good corporate sociability and AWS implementation. We also certified 2 people to the Irish Water Certified Water Steward Standard, and that's a really good program. I'd highly recommend it for anyone starting out on their journey. Work to date, so as I said, we were acquired in 2013 by Nestle, and they set a glide path for water reduction on the site. This is benchmarked against production. So since 2013, we've reduced the water abstraction from the river by almost a third. So we've gone from 920,000 cubic meters down to 675. And you can see some of the projects that were done there. Site level water map. So this is in the AWS standard. It has really, in terms of this, you know, supply and distribution, pre-treatment might be very simple for a lot of people, but certainly the end users, just to really sit down and think what type of end users you have. We've gone a step further than this, and that we've, you know, marked up the quality of the end users as well. So some of them are just taking potable water, some of them are taking RO water, some of them are taking hot RO water, and they all have different costs. For ourselves here on site, we have post treatment. Now that might be very simple. For some people, it might just be a sewer and it drops into it, and that's that. But we have a full wastewater treatment plant here, and then the sink is the Shannon estuary. But a really interesting exercise nonetheless, especially on the users. When you start to sit down and think about, you know, who's really you consuming the water on your site, you might get some surprises there. So our ambitions. So for the site is to be an exemplar site for water stewardship in Ireland and beyond. I think it's really important in terms of the green credentials that Ireland carries, you know, that we actually have standards that back them up and we can deliver on that. For Ireland Inc., it's important to maintain. We were at AWS Platinum certification, so we were extremely lucky to be certified to the Platinum standard for the factory. That's the first remote audit certified Platinum standard in the world. Possibly the first Platinum standard in Europe and only the second in Nestle, one of 6 achieved worldwide so far. So we're quite stoked with that, to be very honest about it, and it really leads into the ambition to be exemplar in terms of water stewardship. It's really, for us, it's the start for a journey. We have a large roadmap of additional items we'd like to do, and to maintain that platinum certification will definitely require some work on our end. So the stakeholder engagement with the catchment area is going to be really, really important in terms of that. So building on our existing stakeholder relations, as just mentioned, into a process of continuous dialogue and joint action in the catchment at national level. So our catchment is so big, we have no choice but really to engage at a national level. But some of the things we have on our roadmap are quite simple. We're looking at like volunteer days to do a clean up along the river banks, and also looking at potentially kind of being the founding members of a river trust for the river deal. Some of the local rivers like the Maguire River have a trust, but the deal doesn't at the moment. And it's quite a large river, it goes back into County Cork all the way through County Limerick. So we think that might be some of the things we'd like to progress in terms of building those relations. As I said, enhancing the green credentials for the Irish manufacturing site and within the greater Nestle family. It's certainly the certification to the platinum standard has certainly rippled through the whole of Nestle, and we have had people coming to us asking us how we achieved it and looking for pointers and feedback. So we're always happy to help people out with that. I think it's a different audit process in that it's very collaborative, but you also need to have your information in good order and stuff ready to answer those questions. Finally, the last big item for the site then is to explore water reuse. It wasn't really an option for us in the Nestle world. Water reuse wasn't something that was really favorable, let's say, in a food manufacturing factory, but the needle has moved a little bit on that, and we're now in a position where we can start to look at reusing water. Technically, it's not awfully difficult. The water we discharge from our wastewater treatment plant is of better quality than the water we take from the river, so we're actually cleaning the water table in that respect. But it's just more of a marketing and public consumer perception factor for the factory and for the product and brand ranges. So water reuse is a big one. So hopefully over the next 10 years, our next roadmap's up to 2030, we can implement those, and we would have an ambition maybe to reduce our water usage abstraction by another 2/3 over that period of time. I think that's pretty much the final slide from ourselves. So just saying that we got platinum certification in September this year, and obviously the site and all the team here are quite proud of that. So if you have any questions with that, we'll pass you back over and we'll take those questions, and thank you for your time.